Oklahomans need their voice in the public policy conversation. Every discussion about public policy solutions right now is Washington-centric. So the middle ground focuses on shifting the conversation back here to the heartland and what the people of Oklahoma think about their lives and their future. The status quo is failing. Regardless of what your beliefs are, the status quo isn't working. Well, that's a middle ground. That is the middle concept that we can all agree on. From the middle, we can come and find those solutions together that empower our people and create opportunity for all.
Good morning, Oklahoma, and welcome to the Middle Ground, the show that believes the status quo isn't working and we can write a better future. I'm your host, Michael Carnuccio. Today we'll be discussing our veterans and our shrinking military, everything from pink slips, the VA, and national security. Plus, we'll hear from Senator Inhofe, and we'll learn what Operation Homefront is doing to help our veterans here in our state. But before we get to all of that, here is where we stand with things now. According to the Heritage Foundation, America has 2.3 million men and women in its armed forces, deployed in 5,000 different places. 78% of adults believe that members of the military contribute a lot to the well-being of our society. That's according to the Pew Research Center. Yet earlier this year, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel announced budget cuts were coming to the U.S. military. The current plan reduces the Army from 520,000 troops to 440,000. That's the smallest size since before World War II. We've known that cuts were coming, but the Defense Department, the way they've enacted these cuts, it has to be shocking and uncomfortable for all. This month, 1,000 Army captains will receive pink slips while they're in combat overseas, informing them that they are now retired from the Army. It is expected that more captains and officers will follow. These are men and women that are currently deployed in the line of duty. This, my friends, is a slap in the face. A recent survey revealed approximately 1 in 3 middle-class military families are now worried about their job security. It appears society's perception of the military is out of sync with the reality our men and women are facing on the front lines. With the violence and chaos continuing to escalate overseas, what message do these cuts send to our people and our enemies? Here to analyze the situation are Brigadier General Hopper Smith with the Oklahoma National Guard and U.S. Navy Rear Admiral Greg Slavonic. Thank you both for being here. Really appreciate your time and your service to the country. Let's start right there. You all have both been in combat and served with men and women in uniform.
Yes.
What is this process like? What is happening right now as these pink slips are being handed out?
Well, I'm sure that those that are on the front lines that are receiving those pink slips are a little bit disappointed, the timing of that, and then also remember that all of these men and women, this is an all-volunteer force, so nobody compelled them to enlist or accept a commission during this time of war. So in a sense, they're all there. They believe in that cause, and I know from being over there that they want to be successful there. And so to receive a report or a notice that their service is no longer needed or necessary, I'm sure it's quite a bit disappointing.
Well, Michael, I think that number 1,100 in the big scheme of things is a small number, and not to downplay how important it is, but I like to think that the men and women we have over there are professionals, just like we have in the civic world, and if they were to receive a pink slip, they're still going to be professionals and do the job until the last day. Being in that environment is tough, but I think they rise above it, and they're still doing a good job, and they've got responsibility to their troops.
So a lot of our viewers are probably sitting at home right now thinking about everything that's happening all over the world, and then to hear this, why is this happening? Let's start with you, Admiral Slavonic. Why now?
Well, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. I mean, if we look at this administration over the last 4 years, last 5 years, it's been coming. I mean, 2 years ago we had sequestration. Look what that did to our military. And so this downsizing, I lived through this in the Vietnam War when we hollowed the force out. I was an enlisted person, so I got to see really up close a lot of individuals get papers and be sent home. So this should not be a surprise. The problem, as Hopper said, is that this is an all-volunteer force. And when you look at the pool of applicants that the military can recruit in the 18 to 24 group, 75% of those young people aren't able to get into the military. So we're going to be losing a lot of experience, and so to capture that and bring that back into the military, it's going to take money.
You mentioned seeing this happen before and living through this before. Folks are probably thinking in their minds, well, what does this mean for the security of the United States? So how does this process impact our security going forward right now?
Well, I don't think it's as far as the military end of national security, it's not helpful. That shows a kind of a firm grasp of the obvious. I think, though, that it is as Admiral Slavonic said, it is reflective of this administration and what their budget priorities are, and that probably few people are surprised. I think what a lot of folks out in Oklahoma and other parts of the United States are surprised at is, as we see events start to flare up around the world, that there's not a reconsideration of those budget priorities. And some of the predictions of naysayers and about cutting the military, some of their predictions are seeming to come true.
And let's stick right there on that point. Are there other options? Is this a period of time where we can say, okay, wait, maybe not the right time to implement this, let's do something else? Are there other options besides sending men and women home?
I would have thought cutting 1,100 individuals there was an option. Why would you cut anyone who's deployed? You had the option to cut people who were in the States. There was no reason to make the cuts of people that were deployed. And again, it's my opinion that it's this administration to make it painful for everyone, including our military, and we've seen that the last 5 years.
Quickly, a question, is this signaling that right now maybe the focus is not on international affairs or national defense, maybe like it should be?
I feel we don't have a national defense policy. We don't have a policy that really shows the military where they need to go. We don't have someone leading from the front, in my opinion, and so this is only, in my opinion, going to get worse over the next couple of years. The Navy is experiencing big cuts in shipbuilding, and so when I was still in uniform, personnel costs accounted for 65% of the Navy budget, and it's that true in the corporate world too. Personnel costs are high, so you're going to start cutting there.
Will you all stick around? We'll talk a little bit more about this.
Yes, sir. Yes.
We'll hear more from Brigadier General Smith and Rear Admiral Slavonic here in just a few minutes. But still ahead, Senator Inhofe sounds off on these cuts and gives his thoughts on the future state of our military. And a little later, Operation Homefront's in studio to discuss how they support military families in our state and how you can help as well. We'll be right back.
We have a vision of Oklahoma that in the 21st century, you and I can be living in a daily land run where freedom just seems to seep out of the ground, where free enterprise creates opportunity for everyone at all levels of society. That is the type of Oklahoma that we were founded on. That's what this state was created upon, and that's where we see our future. It is extremely important to be educating citizens and lawmakers, parents, even children, about what it means to be an American. What is in the history of Oklahoma? What happened during the land run, where people came from all over the world to stake their claim and build up their opportunity here in this state. It's important that we continue to sell that message and we continue to tell people about where we came from and what is in our DNA.
I mean, I think policy at its core is making sure that we inject into the marketplace ideas that provide solutions, conservative ideas that provide solutions to the challenges that we face as a state and as a nation. And to have someone like OCPA continually engaged in submitting and formulating ideas to inject into that marketplace and challenge the thought process, the mindset of the Capitol, is very, very refreshing.
OCPA is founded on the philosophy that free markets, individual liberty, individual initiative, and personal responsibility are what build safe, sustainable societies. It's what empowers people. Anyone, no matter what their socioeconomic status, no matter what their hopes or their dreams are, should care about the success of OCPA, because as we breed excellence, as we succeed, what we're doing is ensuring that they have every opportunity available to them at their fingertips, and that no matter how big their dream, they can achieve it, because we're going to clear that pathway for them.
Welcome back, folks. Oklahoma Senator Jim Inhofe serves on the Armed Services Committee of the United States Senate and has worked tirelessly to ensure that the Defense Department operates efficiently and judiciously in regard to our troops. Senator Inhofe, joins us now to give us his thoughts on the current military situation.
Well, good morning, Michael. I'm glad people are finally catching on to what President Obama is doing to disarm America. You know, it took 1,100 Army captains to receive pink slips to get people's attention. Some of those captains are even serving right now in Afghanistan. I've actually talked to some of them. It's important for your audience to understand that this is a direct result of President Obama's priority. He did away with our only fifth-generation fighter, the F-22. He did away with our lift capacity, the C-17, did away with the Future Combat System, our only ground advancement we've had in the last 50 years, did away with the ground-based interceptor in Poland. Now, that was just the beginning. Since that time, he has taken $487 billion out of the military. Now, in 2011, he decided the military, which is 16% of the budget, should take 50% of the sequestration cuts that totaled $1.2 trillion. I think we all understand what the sequestration was. You got to ask the question: why should 16% of the budget be taken to take care of the rest of the budget? Why should 50% of the cuts have to come out of the military when that only constitutes 16% of our budget? Well, it's so that his social programs would stay untouched, and that's exactly what's happened. Now we're seeing the reality of his budget cuts, with soldiers being notified they've lost their jobs while serving on the front lines. If defense sequestration continues, these pink slips are only going to get worse. Our Army could reach a size not seen since before World War II. General Dempsey told my committee earlier this year. Now, General Dempsey is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the #1 military guy in America. He told our committee last year that our military the force is so degraded and so unready that it would be immoral to use force. That was General Dempsey. Also, the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was Admiral Winfield, and I'll read you what he said. He said in January of 2013, there could be, for the first time in my career, this is the Admiral who's the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs, there could be, for the first time in my career, instances where we may be asked to respond to a crisis and we will have to say we cannot. And my heart goes out to these men and women who are risking their lives and making great sacrifices, yet are being told that they're being separated from the Army and will have no job when they return home to their families. Unfortunately, we knew this was going to happen under President Obama's disarming of America. I said it 5 years ago, and people are now starting to believe it. And while he spends $120 billion on his global warming priorities, and that was spent without either congressional authorization or appropriation, our men and women in uniform are in providing for our national security are suffering. Well, we're going to overcome this, and right now he won't be in office forever. We went through a very similar thing in the 1970s. You might remember that. They called it President Carter's Hollow Force, and we were able to survive it and rebuild our military, rebuild our country, reestablish our priorities. And I got to tell you guys, this is still America, and we're going to pull this thing out. I've got 20 kids and grandkids that are depending on this, and we're going to perform.
Joining us again in studio is Brigadier General Hopper Smith with the Oklahoma National Guard and Rear Admiral Greg Sylvanek, retired from the U.S. Navy. Gentlemen, you just heard from Senator Inhofe talking about his heart going out to these men and women. What advice do you have for any of our armed services that are experiencing this?
Well, I'm thinking of guys that are in country right now that are maybe coming back and heading for civilian life, and such as Admiral Sylvanek had mentioned earlier, be professional. In Dari, there's an expression that goes, "Rose pur samar." It means finish strong, or finish strongly, and that's the advice that I would give those men and women is finish strong. If you are lucky enough to continue serving, serve well. If you're coming to the private sector, come to Oklahoma. There's some great jobs, and you can also get involved in various veterans associations or the National Guard or Reserve and continue to serve your country.
You mentioned the veterans, and I'd like to pivot a little bit. Admiral Savanik, you're a veteran. What has this experience and what's happening with the VA, what has it been like for you or any of your colleagues?
Well, Michael, after the first Gulf War, I was in an area that we were exposed to the environment and the chemicals, et cetera, of the Gulf War syndrome. So when I came back, the VA had sent out letters that everybody who was in those certain zones go and get physicals so we could establish a registry. And I experienced the VA firsthand. I went down, signed up, went through the whole process, and I came away, Oklahoma City, with a very positive experience. And I have since gone to the VA, the clinic out there on May Avenue. Again, very professional. We have a great system, in my opinion, what I've been able to see. I can't talk about Arizona and I can't talk about these other markets, but I think here in Oklahoma we've got a system that takes care of our veterans very well.
So let me ask you both then, if we have some VAs that are working, some communities it seems to be effective, we hear disaster stories elsewhere and trouble for our veterans, which is heartbreaking. What are the solutions? What can be done to make this uniform or to make it work for all?
I actually worked briefly for General Shinseki in the mid and late 90s down when he was 1st Cav Division Commander down at Fort Hood, and he's just an excellent leader, went on to be Army Chief of Staff. I can't help but think that so much of the problems that the VA is encountering right now are due to its mammoth size and the complexity of its task. And that's true of so many agencies, though, is the difficulties they encounter are a function of their size. And so when I see symptoms like that, I tend to want to turn to market solutions and individual choice. And I think there are perhaps some adjustments that could be made even within the VA system. The term vouchers comes to mind, something like that where you give patients choice. That would involve a significant amount of reform, and the reform in how we think about the VA system. But there are alternatives.
And I agree with Hopper. The way I would move forward is we have men and women who are in hospitals, mobile hospitals in the Army, Air Force, Navy. We have Fleet Hospital. Why don't mobilize a Fleet Hospital, move it into a market, Phoenix, and let those individuals take care of other veterans, even for a 30-day period of time? I think that would be better than throwing money at just the VA system, and you could utilize people, men and women in uniform, or bring people out who have retired that are doctors and bring them in.
Gentlemen, this is all the time that we have. Thank you so much for not only being here on the show, but for your leadership and service to the country.
It's a pleasure.
Coming up, we'll hear from Operation Homefront, a group busy supporting our Oklahoma men and women who are serving our country, what they need from you ahead.
Yeah, the Liberty Foundation's job is to essentially shape the debate in states, and we do that by going into the states and making sure that we talk with local groups about how to talk about the jobs issue, how to frame the debate on the jobs issue, so that way it's connecting with American citizens in a way that is pro-free market.
And we can really lead on these issues to try to marry the needs of business, who need talent if they're going to keep the jobs in America, with the needs of the individual who needs those skills if they want to elevate their ability to earn and live their version of the American dream.
And we have to get out and tell the real story. And I think the Liberty Foundation and other organizations like the Liberty Foundation are the ones that can get out there and tell the story. And it comes, frankly, it comes better from the Liberty Foundation than it does from the oil and gas industry.
We have a vision of Oklahoma that in the 21st century, you and I can be living in a daily land run where freedom just seems to seep out of the ground, where free enterprise creates opportunity for everyone at all levels of society. That is the type of Oklahoma that we were founded on. That's what this state was created upon, and that's where we see our future. OCPA is founded on the philosophy that free markets, individual liberty, individual initiative, and personal responsibility are what build safe, sustainable societies. It's what empowers people. Anyone, no matter what their hopes or their dreams are, should care about the success of OCPA, because as we breed excellence, as we succeed, what we're doing is ensuring that they have every opportunity available to them at their fingertips, and that no matter how big their dream, they can achieve it, because we're going to clear that pathway for them. Welcome back. According to the Defense Manpower Data Center, there are more than 21,000 active duty military service members in Oklahoma. That's more than 21,000 families making the supreme sacrifice for all of our freedoms, rights, and security. Carol Herrick, Regional Director of Operation Homefront for Oklahoma and Arkansas, dedicates a lot of her time helping those service members and their family. Carol, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Let's start off and talk about Operation Homefront for our viewers. What's the mission of the organization?
Well, our primary mission is to provide emergency financial and other assistance to men and women in uniform, as well as our wounded warriors. So anyone who's ill, injured, or wounded post 9/11.
Let's talk about the service that you provide. Sure. What are some examples of the specific services that folks might see in the community?
Well, we have a lot of great programs, and some of them could be their own standalone nonprofit. However, we do emergency assistance grants for things like mortgage relief, utility payments. Food assistance is a very big need right now.
You mentioned the food assistance. One of the things we didn't get to talk about a minute ago, but off camera, the gentlemen that were here were mentioning that even the commissaries, part of these budget cuts are shrinking that, and that has an impact on military families. Is that part of what you're seeing requests for?
Well, we've seen a historic increase in food assistance over the last few years. You know, the challenges our military families do face continue, and it's a very challenging lifestyle sometimes, and this is just another challenge they have to overcome.
What are you all seeing in terms of the concern that you're hearing from families about these changes that we just talked about the Defense Department's making? What kind of requests are you getting?
Well, I think a lot of times military families are, they are not immune to what they hear on the news, and typically they do feel concern. Our focus is really just making sure that they know that we're here and we're going to support them no matter what.
I'm looking at the website, and for the folks at home, operationhomefront.net, I believe, is your website, and you can see where you can directly support and help servicemen, a man or woman, and their family. And I got to correct me if I'm wrong, but we take for granted that if the refrigerator goes out at home or the brakes go out on the car, well, I can go home and help my wife out. But if your spouse is overseas in the line of duty, who's helping you? Where's that service coming from? That's kind of the gap that you all fill.
Absolutely, and also in the case where we have wounded warriors, where the caregiver is, a caregiver 24 hours a day, and therefore sometimes the service member is limited on what they can do physically. So in those cases, definitely folks like Operation Homefront make a big difference.
Let's talk about the veterans, increasing roles of veterans. What are you all doing to service veterans or to prepare for more that are about to come home?
Well, in 2012, we expanded our eligibility criteria to meet the need, and every year we look at how we can meet that need more effectively. 93 cents of every dollar that we receive from the individuals and corporations and foundations that support us goes directly to serve those military families and our wounded warriors. So, we go out there and we tell the story and tell folks that there's a need, and the Oklahomans here really do believe in the Oklahoma standard, and we've been very successful with that.
Let's talk about that for a little bit, because you're operating all over the country, your organization does, and of course you spend a lot of your time here in Oklahoma, Arkansas, I think a little in Texas. What makes Oklahoma unique? What are you seeing from the Oklahoma citizens in response to the need?
It's really amazing to me, and it shouldn't be at this point. I've been doing this for 5 years here in Oklahoma, but it really is amazing how responsive people are to the needs of our men and women in uniform.
How can folks at home get involved in this issue or get involved in your organization?
Well, you mentioned the website. That's a great place to start. If they go to operationhomefront.net, they can look at ways to get involved. They can look at current needs on our website and fund one of those. Or they could just volunteer. We do a lot of events throughout the year, and we're always looking for an extra set of hands to help.
Let's say there's one of our viewers sitting at home right now that's saying, I'm passionate about this, I care about this, maybe a family member has served or anything, and they want to do something in their community. They want to get involved. Besides kind of going to the website and helping, what's some advice that you have for them about the needs that are there and how they can help?
I would say get to know your military families at church, at school, in the veterans organizations in your town. because find out what your local military needs are and then find out ways you can support. Sometimes just helping somebody by mowing a lawn is a huge lifesaver. So that would be where I'd start. And of course, if you want to get involved in a local level, Operation Homefront and other organizations like ours is a great place to start too.
Last question, what's the most rewarding part of this job for you? What's one of the unique experiences that you have?
I like being able to help somebody through a time of crisis. I think that that's really something that we help with, and we get to see the immediate results of that. When you're able to give somebody a gift card for food, it's just instant, the relief on their face. So when you give them a package of diapers and the tears start, you can't explain that.
And I said last question a second ago, but we should say, what locations do you have around the state where you actually have a presence physically that folks can come in?
In Oklahoma, we have our regional headquarters is actually in Lawton, and we also have an office here in Oklahoma City, but we also have volunteers all over the state that help with things like our back to school events and our holiday programs.
Wonderful. So OperationHomefront.net is the website.
That is it, sir.
Thank you so much, Carol. Really appreciate you being here. Folks, again, that's OperationHomefront.net and our website at Facebook.com/MiddleGroundTV. We'll be back right after this with some of your comments and your questions.
Yeah, the Liberty Foundation's job is to essentially shape the debate in states, and we do that by going into the states and making sure that we talk with local groups about how to talk about the jobs issue, how to frame the debate on the jobs issue, so that way it's connecting with American citizens in a way that is pro-free market.
And we can really lead on these issues to try to marry the needs of business, who need talent if they're going to keep the jobs in America, with the needs of the individual who needs those skills if they want to elevate their ability to earn and live their version of the American dream.
And we have to get out and tell the real story. And I think the Liberty Foundation and other organizations like the Liberty Foundation are the ones that can get out there and tell the story. And it comes, frankly, it comes better from the Liberty Foundation than it does from the oil and gas industry.
Welcome back, folks. This is the part of the show that we call the lightning round, where you, our viewers, submit questions that we address and talk about on the show. Let's go first to our Facebook page, and Adam Carpenter writes, because the world is becoming a safer place, right? Why is the military the only department this administration is happy to cut while growing the IRS? Adam, I think you're bringing up a fantastic point here because the world is not a safe place. And while diplomacy is a very important part of international relations, we always have to remember that we need to stay strong, and we need to make sure that our men and women in military that are on the front lines defending our families know that we're there to support them and know that they have all the backing that they need. That's why I encourage everyone I see, when you're at the airport, when you're at the mall, if you ever see someone in uniform, take 2 seconds and shake their hand and tell them thank you. That can go a long way. The other point of your question, Adam, that I think is great, the point about the IRS. People right now, for their speech and for their thoughts, are starting to see audits and seeing more communication from the IRS while we're seeing a need for the military. This is a perfect question about where are our priorities in our federal government's budget. Nancy Harvey writes, well, the military will be shrinking anyway because the cuts in their pay and plus how the government treats the vets. I think the point that Nancy is making is that unfortunately with Veterans Affairs we have so many issues. I think we heard from the General and the Admiral earlier, we have a large bureaucracy, and a lot of times with the bureaucracy you're not getting the best service at the output. This is one of the problems that unfortunately the federal government tends to have. And so these are great questions, folks. Please go to our Twitter at MiddleGround TV, and also go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/MiddleGroundTV. 10 years ago, our state had nearly 1,200 bridges declared structurally deficient. But where do we stand today? Next week, we will take a closer look at the 8-year plan going toward major improvements in our infrastructure, in our roads and our bridges, and we'll have all of that and much more next week, Sunday, August 3rd at 8:30 a.m. on Fox 25.